Alright, if you guys have watched this channel before, you know that I'm pro credit card. Given all the rewards and all of the things that they offer, I would be doing you a disservice if I wasn't telling you about the other side of the credit card industry, the dark side, so to speak.
If you only knew the power of the dark side.
These dirty secrets will make you think twice about having that credit card and maybe want to throw it out and maybe throw up a bit in your mouth too. Nothing to see here. Of course, my goal is to be as transparent as I can with you guys and to not give you any BS when it comes to personal finance, and to just offer you guys the best actionable personal finance tips and things that I learned. So it's going to be a well-rounded picture with this and my other videos, kind of seeing the pros and cons of credit cards. So without further ado, let's get into the dark side of credit cards. Credit cards are actually detrimental to small businesses, merchant fees, and it's made up of 3 different fees. So the first is that we have a bank fee, which is, as it sounds, money that goes directly to the bank that issues your credit card. And this is anywhere between 0.8% and 2.45% of the overall transaction value. The next part of the merchant fee is called the network fee, also called the assessment fee. And this goes to the payment networks like Visa and MasterCard. And this is typically between 0.08% and 0.14%. And finally, there's also payment processing fees, and this can vary quite widely depending on where you are in the world. And so these 3 comprise the overall merchant fee that's charged to any business, and especially small businesses definitely suffer because this is going to be well over 3%. Especially with cards like American Express, where the actual merchant fee is a lot higher. You can expect to pay 1 to 4% as a small business, or any business in general, on any set transaction just for offering the service of allowing you to pay by credit card. So this video was first inspired when I was just walking through a suburb of Toronto. For those of you that are from around here, I was in the High Park area, just kind of walking down Bloor Street West, and I was just looking at all these different shops, and every time I went inside them, I noticed that they either didn't have a debit or credit terminal at all and it said cash only, or they would just tell you that they would prefer if you pay with a debit card. And I was always really confused why this was the case. And so I was talking to one lady at one of the stores, and she was telling me just how much, first of all, it costs to have one of those terminals set up in her store, which is a huge monthly fee if you don't buy it outright. And of course, these merchant fees, how much that eats into their profit margin. So this was very terrible for me to see. It's definitely a pain spot that local businesses have to pay for this. And now the worst part of this, that'll probably hurt you if you have a credit card, so you might want to plug your ears for this one, is that these small businesses are directly paying for your rewards. So companies like American Express, or if you have a cashback or a travel rewards card, all of these rewards are simply earned from the merchant fees and are not actually funded by the credit card companies, which is what most people think. Another misconception, and kind of related to this topic, is that $0 cards don't cost you any money, and this couldn't be further from the truth.
For
Because first of all, you have those merchant fees that's being charged to local businesses, but oftentimes, at least in Canada, a law was passed in October 2022 that allowed these businesses, especially larger corporations, to pass that merchant fee onto the customer. So essentially, you're still paying the credit card company every single time you use your card. And of course, this depends on what businesses you shop at, but I've already noticed on my bill that it does have a service fee of around 2 to 2.5%, which is that merchant fee being passed on to me as the customer, which is pretty frustrating if you have a $0 annual fee and you don't want to be paying for it. What's also terrible for small businesses is the fact that if you make a fraudulent claim or someone else racked up a bill on your credit card, oftentimes where that person shops and this includes small businesses, those small businesses will be held liable in these fraud cases to repay the merchandise that was stolen or bought on that card. Now, this isn't always the case. There are exceptions and depends on which credit card company, but there are cases where this has happened and small businesses suffer immensely because of that. So if you really want to support small businesses and you do want to keep carrying your credit card, which is completely fine, what you should do is either pay with your debit card or with cash if you shop in person at those local stores. And I would recommend you do not shop online because the interchange fees, which makes up the merchant fee, is a lot larger for online transactions for these businesses, and credit card companies charge more for online sales. So if you can go in person, then you can kind of converse with them as well while you're already there anyways, say hi, support them in other ways other than just financially, and it saves them a lot of money as well. And if you do have to use a credit card when you're in person, I recommend using a MasterCard since these do have the lowest merchant fees of the three, which is Amex, Visa, and MasterCard. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna look at in terms of the dark side of credit cards is the absolute impeccable marketing of credit card companies. And you'd be surprised what the credit card companies come up with, and this is most commonly seen in the form of store-specific credit cards. You might have seen things like Saks Fifth Avenue, a Best Buy credit card, or even an Amazon credit card that's pinpointing a single business. And this, of course, is a marketing tactic to get you to spend more money at that place. Now, this is brilliant because, of course, you'll spend more money here to earn points, but at the same time, it kind of puts this points blinders on you, and you only look at that brand because it offers you points. For example, if you're shopping at Best Buy, you wouldn't go to another tech outlet to buy your stuff, even if they offer possibly better prices, because you know you'll be getting points and discounts and all these other things that this credit card offers you, so you'll stick to Best Buy. So a good rule of thumb here to make sure that these single brand cards are worth it for you is to calculate what you would normally spend if you didn't have that credit card at that location or at that store, and then calculating the rewards points that you will earn if you spend that amount, and then seeing how much you really spend, and if you're overspending, that doesn't make it worth it to get those points. Another great way around this is to simply just get cash back cards and places that give you the most cash back on things like groceries and gas and things you need anyways, so that you know you're not overspending on purpose. I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Coca-Cola, for sponsoring this video. Unfortunately, that's complete bullshit. They actually didn't sponsor this video, but hey, Coke, if you're out there, this would be awesome. You guys pay some sweet dividends, so if you guys want to sponsor this video, cool. By the way, if you guys haven't tried Cherry Coke, absolute bussin' flavor, you guys have to try that. So, okay, now back to the video. So one of the most notorious credit card haters out there, and one that you guys might be familiar with since he's a big name, is Dave Ramsey. And he had a famous saying in one of his shows where he said that credit cards are like snakes and that there's no good reason to play with them. And there is some truth to this, so let's dive into why. The first and most obvious that you've probably noticed if you have a credit card and logged into your online banking account is that it is absolutely impossible to tell how much you've used on your card at any point in time.
I just can't get these numbers to add up.
It's like we're never gonna get out of this hole.
Credit card debt, does it ever end?
This is because you have things like pending transactions that have been authorized but haven't been posted to your credit account. And you also have things like the actual account balance, which is always not up to date and takes a few days or weeks to update. But then you also have your available balance, which I found is typically the most accurate. But all in all, this is just so opaque and such a difficult way to figure out what's going on. And of course, they do this because they want you to pay interest. This is one of the largest revenue streams for credit card companies. And for you, that's horrible because interest, which is another snake-like manner of these credit card companies, is how much it actually becomes over time. And of course, this is due to our dear friend compounding, which now is working against us. How dare it? Compounding, come back. You need to do investments instead. You need to compound my investments. Thank you. You want to get rid of any kind of debt so that you're not paying that interest. And the reason why it's so bad is that it compounds daily. You might think monthly because that's how often interest is charged, but that's not true. It's actually accruing on a daily basis. So that means if you have $100 outstanding on your credit card and you have a 10% interest rate, that means you're gonna owe $110 the next day.
Hey guys, just editing this video and noticed that I made a mistake here. So the 10% is an APR or annual percentage rate. So it's every single year it's 10%, or that $10 on $100, not every day. So we'd have to divide it by 365 days in order to get that daily accruing compounding interest. So we'll do an example right now.
On which interest is calculated the next day on that balance. So over time, you're paying an absolutely astronomical amount of interest, and it's completely opaque. They don't really make this obvious unless you read the fine print in your credit card contract. Dave Ramsey, he often compares it to being a smoker, and a smoker living to age 90 being the exception rather than the rule. He says the same thing about people using credit cards, that it's very unlikely you won't get burned or scathed by them, and so a person that earns a lot of rewards and ends up not being harmed in whatever way or net positive with credit cards is an exception rather than a rule. Another thing Dave Ramsey says, and it's absolutely true, is that oftentimes some of these portals and ways to redeem your points or actually get the points in your hands takes way more time than it's even worth in terms of points, especially if you're someone that's making a modest sum of money and your hourly rate is pretty high. And even if you're not, like, your time is worth more than figuring out how much those $50 of rewards points is worth and then transferring them to different travel programs and then also using your cash back and figuring out how that works. Sometimes it's just not worth it. And one of the main arguments that I've seen time and again, and this is based in hard evidence from an MIT study, that plastic, which refers to debit and credit cards, but here specifically credit cards, makes people spend more on average than if they use cash. And so Dave Ramsey always tells everybody who comes on his show, if they're having trouble with spending, to either use a debit card, which is the first measure, and the second more drastic measure is to just walk around with cash, since you're much less likely to spend cash, since the pain threshold is much higher for spending it, and on average we spend between 12 and 18% less if we use cash versus a credit card. People tip more if they use a credit card, they buy more expensive items, and of course that lower pain threshold for just tapping, you don't even have to think about how much you're really spending, it's just a number on a screen. Sometimes we don't even look at how much the total is, we just kind of tap and move on, and that's part of the problem. That same MIT study was based on like the behavior of personal finance and the behavior of credit card use. And what they found is that the reward system initiated by using a credit card, especially if you're paying with a smartwatch or if you're paying with a smartphone, this is equivalent to using cocaine or amphetamines. That's how addictive it is to spend and purchase. Sometimes you might get that itch to go on Amazon and just buy something, right? Exactly, that's that itch, that's that reward system just waiting to get activated. Another thing that I was just sitting here thinking about while I was doing my research is how absurd the interest rates are on credit cards. Where in the economy do you ever see anything returning above 10% unless it's something super risky? Even the market does 7 to 8%, and it's pretty risky, right? Even GICs in this super high interest rate environment or bonds are between 3 and 6%. But meanwhile, credit cards are charging between 17 and 25% per year on your debt, which on its own is not even that risky. If you look into the data, it shows that only about 10% of all loans issued on a credit card aren't repaid and end up in bankruptcy. So this isn't a huge loss compared to how much they're charging for interest. Okay, so now what we've all been waiting for, rewards. Are they really that rewarding? Like I mentioned before, just taking the time to go through a travel portal like the Amex travel portal and transferring to different partners, figuring out the point-to-point conversion, making sure you're getting the best value, can take hours out of your day. Most times, if you are booking travel, there's limited seat availability, limited availability of dates that you can travel on. you have to pay more for a better seat, and most of the time you will have to pay the tax and different emissions and fees separately from your tickets. You'll always be out of pocket for that amount. There's also typically extensive layovers, or the only option may be with a layover, which of course also costs you dear time. And that's just the beginning. Sometimes, of course, it does go smoother than this, but if you add up all the time you do this over time versus just going and buying it with your own money on Google Flights, it's a lot easier and it'll actually save you money in the long run. Another interesting area to look at is bonus offers. And of course, these seem very sweet up front, especially I know Amex has some very good ones. But most of the time, these are dependent on the amount of spending, which allows them to collect merchant fees and possibly even pass it along to you again for that set amount of money, which is never a small amount. It's always in the thousands of dollars you need to spend in the first 2 to 3 months in order to get that bonus offer. And of course, some of them might even have points that expire and they don't explicitly tell you that. So you might even lose these bonus points if you aren't paying attention. How it works is that airlines, for travel credit cards, sell reward points to banks, and banks can then issue them to their cardholders. So if there's a huge demand for these points, if everyone signs up for a single card, there's much like the inflation where you are going to need a lot more points. And this is controlled through the point value as well. So 1 point might be worth 2 cents, it might be worth 10 cents. One day it'll be worth 1 cent. You never really know. There's no hard and fast exchange rate for these points. Now you might be thinking, okay, I might as well just get a cashback rewards card then, because obviously that offers a better value and more flexibility on what to do with my money. But the fact of the matter is that these actually accrue points much more slowly, and so it's very hard if you have an annual fee on your card to even cover that with the annual amount if you're spending a normal amount and not overspending just to collect cash back. So again, this might be worth it if you have a $0 annual fee card. You'd have to run the math and make sure that you don't have crazy spending requirements. But again, these cashback cards often also have spending maximums so that they don't have to pay out huge sums of money in cash back each year. And some cards, not all, but some of them also have a unique feature where you can't actually use cash back in like legitimate cash and get cash in your hands. You have to apply it to the balance of your credit card, or you can get it transferred to certain places. So some of them are a little bit sleazy in that way as well. Okay, so now let's sum up the income model for credit cards, companies, and networks. So they earn income, passive income, if I might add, from, bear with me, the following: interchange fees, interest fees, late fees, annual fees, cash advance fees, foreign exchange fees, fraud protection fees, and balance transfer fees, just to name a few. In 2019, credit card companies in the United States alone, so just in the US, not even North America, earned between $3 and $72 billion just in revenue from credit cards. Did you hear what I just said? Between $3 and $72 billion in revenue per year just from credit cards. That's not coming from nowhere. That's come from all those fees, and it's practically passive. If you really break this down, it comes down to about $180 per credit card user. And keep in mind, a lot of these might be people that spend a little bit more, which makes sense, but a lot of people are also using $0 fees, especially students, which are a large percentage of the population, and likely retirees, which don't need to pay an annual fee on their card anymore. What they want to earn most on is merchant fees, but what they love even more, the juicy interest from customers. That's where they make the big bucks. Interest income is by far the most lucrative for credit card companies. This is because they can compound it, like I mentioned, and just squeeze every last dime out of you. Credit cards hurt small businesses. They often hurt you. They have rewards that are kind of sus, and a business model that's overall even more sus. Now you can see why I wanted to cut up all my cards as soon as I learned all of this, and why you might want to as well. But before you go and cut up all your credit cards, you should carefully consider what the perks of credit cards might be as well. And if you take the tips and everything I mentioned in this video to heart and you understand how they work, you're in a better place to use it more responsibly and protect small businesses. And if you do consider staying with a credit card or having at least one of them, and you want to master that credit score to save you hundreds of thousands of dollars on interest and not pay that to the credit card companies, check out this video right here on how to get a perfect 850 credit score.